Hello YouTubers, Tyler the Movie Maniac here, and to start things off, I'm going to talk about my favorite Disney World attraction.
The Great Movie Ride was more than just an attraction that I really loved as a kid. It was a life-changing experience for me. If I had not ridden the ride at the time of my elementary school youth, I probably never would have taken an enjoyment for classic movies at such a high level, let alone give me the love and passion for films that I have today. Riding this was my aha moment in life, the awakening of a new outlook on life that I never thought I would ever get from a Disney theme park attraction. To pay tribute to this former Disney attraction, I'm going to talk about my past experiences on the ride from when I was 7 years old to the last time I ever rode it, as well as explaining why it has influenced me so much, why it has made me who I am today, why I love film as an art form. Now, for those of you who aren't quite familiar with the ride, I'll give you a quick summary. Inside a replica of the famous Hollywood landmark, the Grauman's Chinese Theater, guests would be seated into a vehicle controlled by a tour guide as they would ride through each film genre. Scenes from classic Hollywood movies like Casablanca, The Searchers, Alien, Mary Poppins, and The Wizard of Oz would be recreated by life-size animatronics modeled after the actors who starred in those films. At one point during the ride, the vehicle would be hijacked by either a gangster or a Western bandit, where guests then become their hostage as they ride through the movies. That is until the criminal gets killed by stealing a rare cursed jewel in the Raiders of the Lost Ark portion of the ride, resulting with the tour guide coming back who was in disguise as a cloaked temple guard from earlier in that scene. After visiting the Land of Oz, the vehicle then enters a dark room with a large screen to show a montage of many other classic and modern-day movies to conclude this journey. I was 7 years old when I first experienced the ride, and I was more than excited to be visiting both Disney and Universal for the first time. When I went to visit Disney's MGM Studios, now known as Disney's Hollywood Studios, naturally, the first ride that I went on was the Great Movie Ride. My first experience on the ride was as average as to any other kid would have felt about the ride. I was enchanted seeing Mary Poppins and Bert sing on the rooftops, scared by the scenes involving shootouts and the whole alien sequence, amazed at seeing Tarzan swing around, who I mistook for George of the Jungle at the time, and was in awe when I entered the Land of Oz, seeing the Munchkins sing, the Wicked Witch popping out, and Dorothy and her friends gazing at the Emerald City. When the ride was over, I thought it was cool, but that was it. It didn't change my outlook on movies, mainly because I didn't understand or remember the other films shown on the ride. Pretty much everything that I point out from my nostalgia is the only bits from the ride that I remembered at the time, with the exception of the skeletons. It was also the only time that I ever got to see the portion of the ride when a bandit steals your vehicle during a robbery. It pains me that I barely remember it, and don't even have so much as a recording of it to help me remember that experience. I can only recall the burning building in front of me, and the shooting between the bandits and the sheriff. I didn't even remember the bandit ever hijacking the vehicle either. Also, despite the alien scene terrifying me, while I do remember seeing Ripley hiding, I didn't even know that there was an alien in the scene for how dark it was. I just thought there was more shooting going on. Before we had the wonders of YouTube showing footage of Disney attractions, I only had 2 videos of the ride in my collection. The first was a home movie of when my mom and dad went on the ride at the park before I was born. It contained the Mary Poppins scene, Cagney's bit, a second or two of the scenes of John Wayne and Alien, and the whole appearance of the Wicked Witch that I remember watching briefly before I ever went on the ride for the first time. The second video was a theme park video called Around the World with Mickey and Friends that involved the characters sitting at Mickey's house watching home movies of their trip in the park, which was really a short and updated compilation of 3 previous videos sold at the parks, which were A Day at the Magic Kingdom, A Day at Epcot Center, and A Day at MGM Studios, that also contained an exclusive preview of their new theme park that was coming out at the time, Animal Kingdom. Even though that park was already open by the time my mom purchased the video during our visit. The portion of the video that would show the Great Movie Ride begins with a director directing a guest after walking into a shot and standing on top of Mickey Mouse's cement footprints. We would then cut inside the theater to see Mickey and Minnie on the ride waiting with excitement for it to begin. The video would then show 3 portions of the ride, out of order mind you, which were the shootout in Gangster Alley, the Raiders of the Lost Ark set, and the Western bandit hijacking the car and blowing up the bank, as we would watch Mickey and Minnie react to all this in pure terror. It's almost as if the video wanted to promote the dark side of the ride as opposed to its enchanting side. Well, anyway, upon watching these clips of the ride regularly as a kid, I began to wonder about the movies featured on the ride, dying to experience it again to get the names and remember the things that I missed, like how my tour guide got back, for example. I would spend a good half of my childhood years wondering and dreaming about re-experiencing the ride, that is until the summer of 2004, as I was just about to enter the 5th grade. The first thing that grabbed my attention was the trailers for the movies that were being featured on the ride. During my last visit, I never got a chance to see the trailers. We just went right straight to the room where we would be boarded into our vehicle. The only image I remembered in the pre-show room was a gangster. Finally getting the opportunity to watch the trailers multiple times, I finally realized that the tough guy that I saw on the big screen when I was a kid wasn't a gangster, but was none other than Humphrey Bogart bidding farewell to Ingrid Bergman in Casablanca. I took an interest in all the films shown, waiting eagerly to re-experience the ride. When I was seated in my vehicle, I was so thrilled that I gave my little brother Jack paw. We were both big fans of Spaceballs at the time, so that became our secret handshake. With the images of the trailers and most of the film's titles in the back of my mind, being beyond excited to see how the ride was going to recreate the scenes that I forgot, my tour guide came on to introduce herself, the neon lights on the marquee started to light up, and the song Hooray for Hollywood played as my vehicle started to move inside the neon-lit theater. My second experience was just as impressive as I remembered my first one. I was still in awe at how lifelike the animatronics looked, ducked and covered during the shootout in Gangster Alley, got nervous when a gangster hijacked the vehicle that I was in, and cheered when my tour guide came back. But my second experience on the ride felt a lot different than it was the first time. I wasn't just caught up in the action. I became legitimately fascinated in the films that were being recreated right in front of my eyes, as well as the actors being portrayed on the ride, such as James Cagney, Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, and Humphrey Bogart. They seemed like the films that I would thoroughly enjoy based on the trailers and the ride's version of them. Even with movies that didn't keep me hooked for an extended period when I was little, like Fantasia and, shockingly, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the ride inspired me to give them another look. The film that intrigued me the most was The Public Enemy with James Cagney, mainly because it took place at Gangster Alley, James Cagney looked cool, and I was curious to see characters like Muggsy and his two dim-witted henchmen appear in the movie. Which, to my surprise, was all just made up for the ride, but I'm getting ahead of myself now. Upon all the awesomeness that the ride has brought through its action, effects, sets, and choice of movies, nothing, and I mean nothing, could prepare me for the last part of the ride. After riding through Oz and heading towards the big screen for the grand finale, while I did remember a film montage being shown at the end, I didn't remember any of it except for laughing at the Who Framed Roger Rabbit clip to break up the romantic kissing sequence. So going back to this part again, I was interested, but I felt like that my experience was going to be the same as watching a montage of movie clips from movie collections shown on previews on VHS tapes. Good God, was I wrong. From the moment when I saw Charlie Chaplin approach the screen, I went from laughing and looking at images of silent movies with delight to being shocked to see the montage always change genres by showing clips both new and old that was perfectly edited, paced, and composed. Seeing so many iconic clips from movies I mostly never heard of, but seeing their images somewhere before, getting a view at Hollywood's legendary stars in their famous roles saying their famous quotes, and swinging from lighthearted musicals to over-the-top comedy to hardcore action and adventure to inventive horror and sci-fi images to Hollywood epics that look as big as I'm hearing all kinds of different classic musical scores, didn't make me feel like I was watching a simple montage. I felt like I was going through the Stargate in 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was a surreal and beautifully breathtaking experience, and when the ride was over, I walked out feeling reborn. I no longer saw films as just pure entertainment full of different genres to appeal to a particular crowd. I felt that there was so much more to it. And the first thing that I had to do when I got home was to persuade my parents to buy or rent the films I haven't seen yet or watched in full. I already had a copy of Fantasia in my video collection. I viewed it again, finding myself amazed by the grand scale animation being set to the music's motion so beautifully. My mom bought me a DVD copy of Singing in the Rain since I couldn't rent it anywhere, that I loved so dearly from the setting, characters, direction, and song and dance scenes. And my dad had an old recording of Raiders of the Lost Ark right off of HBO that sucked me in with its adventure, excitement, and lead character. But as much as I admired those films, the others took me a little time to understand. I had Casablanca on VHS, but after sitting through almost an hour of bonus footage before seeing the actual film, by the time the film started, I was lost, tired, and confused. Which would make sense considering how young I was at the time. I begged my parents to get me The Public Enemy, and when I watched it, I was bored and upset by the lack of action, and that there was no character named Muggsy in the film. But as I got a little older and watched these films again and again, I admired them more and more for its writing, characters, performances, and visuals. Some of the movies that were featured on the ride, I didn't get a chance to know the titles. The ride never claimed what Western film that Clint Eastwood was dressed as, and I couldn't remember the name of the Western film that John Wayne was in the trailer, which caused me to rent any Western film starring them, hoping that I'd recognize which film the ride was mimicking. And I knew the opening scene with the girls lined up singing was based on a musical trailer that was in black and white with dancing showgirls, but I somehow missed the title. Upon doing some research as time went by, I found the titles for the films and finally gave them a look and enjoyed them all. The only film I couldn't see was Alien since I was too young, but I finally got my chance to see it as I got older, and it's one of my favorite horror films of all time. Also, I didn't have a desire to watch the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan films, since there were so many of them and they just didn't seem to be my kind of franchise. But recently, I did eventually check out at least the first two films since they received such high critical acclaim, and I thought they were awesome despite how dated they were. Though I saw most of the films on the ride, my obsession didn't stop there. I was still thinking about those glorious images shown on the montage and remembering how rich my experience was, trying so hard to remember every single frame but couldn't. And keep in mind that this was before YouTube started to pick up. I tried researching the films featured on the montage, but had little to no luck. I kept searching and searching until I found myself stumbling upon film websites like IMDb and filmsite.org. These sites gave me lists, photos, quotes, insight, and trailers from many great films that were categorized by many different themed lists, not just as the greatest films of all time. My mom even gave me a film book about the movies made from classic Hollywood that led up to the present. So by that point, after finding so many film sites and having a fair number of film books that exposed me to many other great movies, and being able to rent all these movies at the library for no fee, this all increased my love and obsession for films. I would soon talk about them endlessly, rent as many as I possibly can, and continuously study them, to eventually writing about them, and it all started from a simple trip at Disney World. In the summer of 2013, I came back to Disney's Hollywood Studios to ride the Great Movie Ride a third time. Only this time, I was determined to sit up front with my tour guide and whoever was going to hijack my vehicle. I didn't care how long I had to wait for it, I simply had to do it. The cast member who made the seating arrangements gave me my shot, which made me so happy and excited that I asked him to sign my old autograph book as a special thanks for arranging it. I know that asking for a seating arrangement isn't an uncommon thing, but it meant so much to me that, really, I just didn't know how else to thank him. Before I rode on the ride for the third time, I have occasionally watched many videos on YouTube that showed the whole ride over the years, so I knew what to expect, except for who was going to hold up my tour guide. But still, nothing could ever duplicate the experience of actually being there, and you can bet that when I rode inside that neon-lit theater next to my tour guide, I was just as thrilled and awe-inspired as I did when I first found my passion for films. I did notice, however, that the ride wasn't as pitch-perfect as I remembered it. I thought the Footlight Parade sequence was lackluster, and the projector screen showing Mickey Mouse and the Sorcerer's Apprentice seemed tacked on. But I was still in complete awe when I was on it all the way through, realizing that even the ride that changed me is not perfect, like all films in general. And before I left, I actually asked my tour guide to sign my book for being a part of my third experience. That's how much I value this ride. That's how much it's changed me. In 2015, Turner Classic Movies began to sponsor the ride, and the ride was refurbished to have the primary host of the channel, Robert Osborne, host the ride. The ride felt more like a marketing tool to get people to watch TCM rather than presenting itself as a loving tribute to films, but I was still open to riding it again, given that it still had the spirit of the original ride. All the classic scenes were there, and the new montage looked incredible. And since I'm a big fan of TCM, I didn't really mind as much. I dreamed of visiting the updated version of the ride with the hopes to go into the vehicle that gets hijacked by a Western bandit since I haven't experienced that since childhood, but unfortunately, it was never meant to be. In the year 2017, on August 7th, I found a video on YouTube titled Top 10 Disney's Great Movie Ride Secrets, a Disney Ride Farewell. After watching the video, I was in disbelief that Disney was going to close one of their oldest and most iconic attraction at their Hollywood theme park. I began doing some research on it, praying for it to be false, but it all turned out to be 100% true. After hearing so many rumors over the years about the ride closing down, dating back to when I was in middle school, I never thought that this would ever happen. The ride to me seemed as iconic as, say, the Haunted Mansion or Pirates of the Caribbean. It will go through some minor changes and alterations over time, but will always remain, no matter what. But I was dead wrong. And now standing in its place is Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, which for the record looks exciting as well as impressive, but I'm always going to feel a bit bitter towards it for replacing a ride that has changed my life. It still really hurts me that the ride is gone. Gone for no child to appreciate or be introduced to classic cinema the same way how I was. Gone for no one to get a chance to experience the other part of the ride that they missed. Gone for no one to experience or re-experience the identity for the Hollywood Studios theme park. Every movie has an end, and I suppose that it sadly applies to rides based on movies, especially with one as great as this.
Thank you so much for watching my first video, and if you have any requests, please leave a comment below. I'd be happy to review any film from the past. Until then, this is Tyler the Movie Maniac, signing off. Take care.